Hello, I'm here with Michael Bolton, the teacher of rapid software testing and the program chair for EuroSTAR 2013. Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking the time out to have a chat with me. I really appreciate that.
More than welcome.
How are you doing? I guess you'll keep me very busy.
I am within a couple of days of going on an extended trip to China,
Oh, lovely.
which is, yeah, that's pretty interesting, a little bit daunting because I hate being illiterate and I hate being, well, not being able to speak, as many people will know, would be a particular dilemma for me. So I have just come back from a Mandarin lesson, and I'm hoping to be able to use some of that. Um, Trouble is, people in China are very polite and they're enthusiastic to be helpful to me and also to practice their English. So we're going to run into a conflict where I'm going to ask that they speak to me in Mandarin and they're going to ask that I speak to them in English, and I guess we'll sort it out over beer, which is one of the few things that I can do.
That's the
I
common
can say
language, isn't it?
Lao Ban.
Lao Bam.
Yes,
Brilliant.
Lao Ban.
Yeah.
That's boss. No, that says boss. And then Peugeot, Ching, Peugeot,
That's a,
please, beer. So Peugeot.
that's the common language.
That's right, the international language of beer.
That sounds familiar. So we quite often have a conversation in pidgin Spanish with like the Spanish barman who's trying to learn English. So he's speaking to us in pidgin English. It's uh,
Hmm.
it's quite humorous, but a great way to learn.
Well, I mean, but it's in a sense, it's the way we all learn everything, right? We immerse ourselves in some kind of culture, and we sometimes have problems communicating with each other, and we work it out. When there's something important to communicate, like I want a beer right now, we learn how to do that, or we learn how to get other people to understand us, and that's true in every domain, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I guess so. It's going to be quite interesting having technical conversations in a language you don't understand, or is the technical conversation going to be in English?
Well, English does dominate technical conversations worldwide. But one of the things that I'm noticing as a trainer and as a coach is people learn stuff by interacting with the problem, um, only guided, I think, by interacting with the teacher. And so I don't actually have to say a whole lot. In fact, it's almost better if I don't. If only I could learn to do that in English. Um, it's extremely important for, I think, for people to develop their knowledge in their own way, and they do that by encountering what they're doing and interacting with that. It's like driving. We don't learn how to drive by lecture. We don't learn how to ride bicycles by lecture. No one can really effectively describe to you what it's like to change gears on a car with a manual transmission in a way that resonates anything like how it's going to resonate when you actually do it and you start getting feedback from the car.
Crikey, no.
So but I think testing works that way too. Um, and learning in general is you don't get to know something by hearing about it to the degree that you get to know something in the doing. So that's it in a way, not being able to have those kinds of conversations, um, or having severe inhibitions on those kinds of conversations, is a benefit.
Yeah,
Um, and the people there, they work stuff out amongst each other. Um, and the process of going through trying to translate what I say, and the process of trying to explain it back to me in another language, I think is really interesting. It affords a different pathway to learning about stuff. You have to take a different approach. It's much more difficult to go to sleep. In English, when all the classwork is happening in English, it's easy for me to say stuff and have people come to what James Bach talked about in his Let's Test keynote as shallow agreement.
Yeah.
We believe we understand each other, and so we act as though we do. Well, when I'm dealing with anybody who speaks a language other than English, we know right away that there are going to be issues here of trying to get to some deeper understanding of what it is I'm talking about. And I think that adds a whole bunch to the learning. It deepens it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned over in Spain is I use a lot of kind of local things to like the English tongue or the English language.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of look at me blankly. And then I sort of have to kind of, oh crikey, yes, yep, sorry about that. So in terms of I'll have to go and annoy him. I say, whereas I'll go and badger him. And then,
Yeah, right.
yeah, what are you talking about? It's like, oh, I'll go and poke them. No, okay. But yeah, and then
Right.
you can see in some kind of meetings we have, and you're talking about stuff, and you can see the glazed over look in their eye, and then I guess that's where drawing comes in handy, right?
It might, or acting stuff out, or doing something, and saying, "Here, watch this," or having them do it, and me saying something like, "Yes, yes, yes, that's it." There's a really interesting book that I'm in the middle of reading right now. I've been eating it in small bites. A book called Surfaces and Essences. Analogy as the Fuel and Fire of Thought. It's by Douglas Hofstadter and another fellow, I think it's Sander, a French guy. That book is really fascinating because it exposes the reader to all kinds of ways in which everyday taken for granted speech is very analogical, metaphorical, elusive. Really remarkably so. I mean, I said everyday speech. Well, every day.
Yeah.
That's an analogy for ordinary, right?
Yeah.
Common. And yet we say things like every day without really thinking about them. And your example of badger is really wonderful there. It's just exactly what Hofstadter is talking about in this book, is this natural capacity for humans to express things in terms of other things. And what that means is that every language becomes quite idiomatic. As soon as you're trying to explain something new, you have to go to an analogy in order to link up what you know already with what you're learning about, what you don't know yet. And I think that's fascinating because, of course, we're not in control of how we do that. We're not aware of how that process works. Although Hofstadter and Sender in this book are working really hard on trying to comprehend how that works and explain it to the reader. But a lot of this stuff is still pretty much unknown, though.
Yeah, and I guess if you move that into the technical domain, we often use the metaphor to try and explain a technical solution or a technical problem in a common language that is to us like we, trying to go to dinner and split a bill between 6 people, for example.
Yeah, by the way, I should point this out. I'm getting a little bit of distortion on the call there. We might want to be careful.
Okay.
About that. It sounds to me like Skype is having a little bit of trouble today.
Is it? That'll be our Scottish internet.
Yes, it varies. The quality of the sound varies from moment to moment. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Well, it's nothing you can do. But absolutely. I mean, just where do we store data? In memory.
Yeah.
Huh? What kind of memory? What kind of memory goes away when you stop applying power to it? In human, well, I suppose it's true in human terms as well, I guess. But yeah, we put something into storage. Oh, really? What is being stored on a disk drive? Well, wait a second. What does that have to do with disks, and what does it have to do with driving? That'd be okay, except all of a sudden I now have a static drive. But is it a drive? Why is it a drive? Why is it called a drive anyway? Damned if I know.
Yeah.
I as an etymologist, I'd love to find out how that came into the lexicon, but I don't know. And yet there it is. So
It is strange, isn't it, how we actually communicate at all when you think about all the complexities.
yes, it's a miracle that it works.
That's it. I do know people that will just speak louder and slower and hope that actually gets through to some people that don't understand.
Well, you were mentioning Harry Collins before, and that's one example of something that he uses a condition of communication, right? That sometimes a repeated string will work,
Yep.
where it didn't work the first time necessarily. So maybe you change something about the string or the delivery of it.
Would that be condition 3 or 2?
I can't remember, not offhand anyway. I'd have to look it up. But one of those earlier ones, the one before interpretation, because if all you're doing is saying something slower and more loudly, there's not interpretation happening there, I don't think.
No, that's it. I'm just working my way through it at the moment. Perhaps I'm not giving it the time it deserves, but I'm finding it quite hard going, personally. So
I've heard reports of that from a number of people. I don't think I got all the way through it on the first go either. There are books that are like that. There are books that they're taking you to a place that's far enough away from where you live that you do have to take a couple of runs at it. In fact, that's a condition 4 thing, I think. Something about the receiver has to change. And I think interpreting different ideas that are different from what we're used to hearing about, that is partly an interpretation thing, partly a condition 5 thing from his book, and partly a condition 4 thing where something in me has to change sometimes before I can understand the next line of the discussion or argument.
And that's not a bad thing, right? Is it? You have to take yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's great. I enjoy it.
Yeah, so where am I up to the moment? Yeah, he's just talking about how we have like road signs, for example. So in the UK, we have a straight up arrow means straight ahead, whereas in France, it's kind of leaning slightly away from you, for example. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there is stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. He says you can skip this bit, but I thought I might as well stick with it and wade through and get the grassroots down.
Whenever they say, "Oh no, you could skip this bit," that's always like a red flag to me. Oh no, I want to go have a look at
it. Yeah. That's it. What's in here? Why do you not want me to read this bit?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What might I have missed?
So go on.
I was just saying, what might I have missed?
Yes, that's it. And he's going to refer back to that section later on in the book, and you'll be like, blimey,
yeah.
I'll go back. But so your session was on tacit versus explicit. Let's test.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't make it, unfortunately, but I had the fortune to listen to it after Alexis recorded it, which is really handy.
Oh, good.
But it was a really interesting take on putting it into a testing context. I really enjoyed it. Did anyone fall into a trap that you were setting for them?
Oh, gee whiz. Which trap was that now? It's been a month.
Take your pick. That's it.
Oh, the calculator exercise, probably. That's not really my trap. That's so much of that presentation owes so much to Harry's book. Although that particular exercise may be from The Shape of Actions. He certainly alludes to it in tacit and explicit knowledge. But the exercise is to ask how you figure out something. The example that he gives the book is how do you change your height from feet and inches to centimeters? And most people will rather unthinkingly say, well, I use a calculator. And what's amazing to me about that, especially in light of Collins' discussion of it, is how much we fail to notice, how much fixing up we do. How, for example, he points this out, and virtually everybody does this. If you tell people that it's 12 inches to a foot, and that my height is 5'8", I rarely see them, certainly not in North America at people of a certain age, but I rarely see them multiplying 5 by 12 on the calculator. They say essentially, 5 by 12, I know what that is, and then that 8, that's 68. And then they do the multiplication on the calculator. But, for example, nobody ever points out the degree to which they have to know the sequence of keys, right? In order to get there, it's 68. Well, why not 86? I mean, 8 is a digit. 6 is a digit. Why do they go in that order? Well, biggest one first. Oh yeah. Well, how did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the plus, and then you put in the other number, and then you hit the equals sign. Well, especially these days, less so when I was a kid, because honestly, I remember early days of pocket calculators. I remember that I could buy for $20. I could buy a 4-function calculator, and it was a brand new thing. It had a LED, not an LCD display, and I learned how to use that calculator basically by doing what. Typing into it or hitting keys in the order in which you read the terms. What was interesting was friends of mine had these fancy HP calculators that used reverse Polish notation, in which you give in this case 58 or 68, enter 2.54 times, and then the answer appears in the display. Well, I had to learn how to do that. I had to be taught how to do that. But these days, with the first kind of calculator, the infix notation, kids don't have to learn that. They sort of soak it up from the culture. You never see them explicitly learning how to do that stuff. And what's even more interesting, of course, is that they're able to generalize. You show them how to add, and instantly they know how to multiply, how to divide, how to subtract using a calculator.
Yes.
But it's not the calculator that's doing the work. That's the remarkable thing to me, that people don't pay attention to the amount of processing and interpretation and repair that they do as part of figuring out how tall somebody might be in centimeters.
Yeah, the calculator is just a tool, isn't it? It's the person doing the work.
That's right. And can you think of something more relevant to testing than that notion? That's so vitally important when people talk about how, all these tools are going to replace testing. Yeah, well, in the same way, I suppose, that all these cars are going to replace walking.
Yeah.
Or the equivalent thing would be to say cars are going to replace transportation. Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Cars aren't going to they'll modify it. They'll change it. They will accelerate or enhance or intensify, as McLuhan would have pointed out. They'll do all those things. But they will also have effects on the people in the society that use them. And that's something that Harry has signaled he intends to talk about in the fall at EuroSTAR, and it's something that's deeply interesting and fascinating to me because I don't think people are paying a whole lot of attention to that stuff. I don't think, in general, people pay attention to the ways that, as McLuhan said, and I think he was referring back to Emerson or maybe Thoreau, when he said that we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us.
Crikey, okay, yeah. I'll have to get that reference off you after the interview. I could put it up as a link. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's vitally important that we do not have passive interactions with technology, and therefore every change in technology means a change in us. And I think as a culture we've not been terribly aware of that. Sometimes it shows up, and when people say, "Well, what effect is TV having on our kids?" Well, yeah, but what effect is TV having on you, bub?
Yeah, that's it. When was that McLuhan quote from?
Oh my goodness, from 50s or 60s. I could with a little bit of quick work, I could identify where it's from.
Just saying, that's very insightful, isn't it? If you think where we are now in terms of people with their smartphones, and and how much their life is now dependent. I mean, when I was a kid, you'd have to meet somewhere like 3 p.m. and you'd have to be there at 3 p.m. There was none of this texting on the way saying I'm going to be late or anything.
Yeah. I don't remember how we used to meet. The quote, according to WikiQuote anyway, is from Understanding Media, which was one of his, I guess, his second really big book. His first being the Gutenberg Galaxy. But he was whack, McLuhan was. Interestingly, lived about a mile from where I am now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Fiona Charles lives even closer.
Is that whack in a good way or whack in a bad way?
Oh, in a good way. It was just a marvelously stimulating writer and I think a prankster. I think much of what he was doing was teasing people. A lot of people complain, for example, that his work is oblique and hard to understand. But then if you recall that his favorite author, and he was an English professor, his favorite author was James Joyce.
Right.
You see a lot of Joyce's playfulness in McLuhan's own writing. And another quote that's germane to that is McLuhan saying that of his students, so, well, I don't care if they agree with me, I just want them to think. Yeah. So I think McLuhan, I think, provocatively said stuff that was to some degree impenetrable. You had to go to some work to try to make whatever sense of it you will. But of course, that's the essence of poetry. Metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Analogy, if you will.
Take from it what you will, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I need to ask, Harry Collins, EuroSTAR, and Program Chair.
Yep.
Chicken egg. What came first? Did you when you were you like, right, Harry, I'm gonna work for Program Chair. I'm gonna try and get it so I can get you on at EuroSTAR, or was it you were invited to be Program Chair and then you were like, I know exactly who I'm going to get on? Which came first, Program Chair or Harry?
Well, for a while, I was thinking, boy, this guy was really interesting. I'd love to hear him speak at a conference or something like that. But I mean, it had not occurred to me before the EuroSTAR people so kindly and what's the word I'm looking for? When somebody gives you an honor, when they honored me by asking, would you be program chair? I've been a conference chair before, and it's a big job and it's hard work. And so I was, oh no, but wait, I could get Harry Collins to speak. And I could get Laurent Bossavy to speak. So both of those two, pretty much the moment the idea was mooted to me, both of those two leapt to my mind as people that I wanted to bring in. But right away it was Harry Collins. He was on the list. It's there are other people who we considered and all that sort of stuff, but Harry was right there for the get-go, to the degree, in fact, that you could say that I had that idea before EuroSTAR, but the two of them went together pretty well. It was just a kismet.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Because I wouldn't say when I look at other keynotes, the other keynotes tend to be from within our industry.
Yeah, maybe Ian Rowland is not. Well, although he's got experience in our business, that's not the angle that he's coming from. Laurent, I don't think identifies himself as a tester per se.
Software development in the biggest.
Yeah. Well, in that sense, sure. Yeah. Although it's interesting because if you think of software development as a form of applied science. Harry's been watching scientists for years and years and years, so there's that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is it was actually kind of plaintive when I first contacted him. One of the things that Harry responded a little wistfully was that I've been waiting for years to hear from the artificial intelligence community, and they never call, they never write. I felt bittersweet about that. How wonderful that we're giving him this platform. By the same token, how disappointing that the AI community is missing this extremely important point. I think very few people are looking at the idea that to be intelligent in a human kind of way, in the way that humans usually talk about when we talk about intelligence, surely to goodness means being able to act as a social agent.
Yeah. Humans'
socialness is at the essence of what makes us human, I think. I don't see a lot of interest in that in the AI community. The mistake I keep seeing I don't understand where it comes from, but I guess it's this fascination that we have with tools. The claim that Deep Blue, the computer, beat Gary Kasparov. Well, no, that's not true at all, because a team of computer scientists and chess experts, armed with a powerful ass machine, that group of people together beat Kasparov. And in addition, I would argue that because I think I got this insight from Harry as well, but I also to some degree got it from Jerry Weinberg, that Deep Blue is playing a different game from the game that Kasparov is playing. It's not playing chess in the way humans play chess.
No.
It's going down a long tree. It's doing a lot of computational kinds of processing in very explicit ways. And I don't think that you could get Kasparov to explain, by definition, you couldn't get him to explain the tacit parts of it. There'd be aspects of his tacit knowledge that he cannot relate. And it's reasonably clear to me that humans and machines don't do that the same way. The other thing, though, that is an element to this, I think, one time was listening to Jerry Weinberg talking, I think it was at an AYE conference, and he asked what the object of the game of chess was. And some people in the room said, well, to win the game, to checkmate the other guy's king. And Jerry said, well, I don't think that's the purpose of the game of chess. I don't think that's it. And, a lot of confused looks. And he said, well, I think the purpose of a game of chess is to have a nice game of chess. Because if the thing about beating the other guy were true, then the world's greatest chess masters would look more like Olympic athletes or boxers, right?
Yeah.
Because what would you do? Is it just get up and the bigger guy threatens to beat on the smaller guy until the smaller guy resigns, right?
Yeah.
So the object of the game, he said, and this was the key. The object of the game is not to win the game, or at least that's an object of the game, but a higher order object of the game is to honor the rules of chess.
Okay.
To go through the social process of playing a game of chess. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. To say nothing of being completely obvious in retrospect, but I didn't get it until Jerry pointed it out. Of course, the object of playing chess is a social object. It's a human purpose. And it's not this binary thing of winning or losing. It's winning or losing while honoring the rules. It's one of the reasons I get so exercised about hockey. When I watch hockey on a television, whenever I see the fights, it's wait a second, these things don't have anything to do with hockey. And to the degree that, for example, two players fight, one goon and one not so goon, and the not so goon player takes, or the goon takes the not so goon player out of the game, then I view that as cheating. I know lots of hockey fans don't, but I'd say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't have anything to do with hockey. This has to do with beating people up.
Yeah, that's it.
So for that, at least in part for that reason, I think the most exciting thing to watch is in downtown Toronto. There's a big ice rink out in front of City Hall, and very late at night, midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the winter, you can go there and you can watch players playing hockey, and the rules of the game are no contact, right? You're not allowed to contact the other player. And watching them, if you think watching players hit each other is exciting, watching them try to avoid hitting each other at that kind of speed, that's really exciting. Yeah. And the other thing about it is it focuses the game on the skills, the actual skills of hockey, rather than on the bulk or the pugilistic intensity of the players.
Yeah, to see how quickly they can just knock each other over.
Well, or knock each other out of the game, which is worse.
Yeah, that's something I've started to realise with my testing. And when you start realising, as you said, it's pretty obvious in retrospect, the social aspect of it. And I think it came when I started doing the BBS foundations, and it's just like, yes, you could say computer software is a series of bits and bytes, but actually we built it to be used by a person. And
well, that's Chem. There's that line through Jerry Weinberg's work and through Chem's work that this is for social purposes.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it just ties in with any time with like Hillary talking about like kind of observations and things like that, and the human aspect of it, and then. Just you talk about, how you define a bug being something that bugs someone at some time, who matters, all the different variations thereof. And you think it's all about the relationship. When a human's involved, it's about the relationship, not about the two things interacting.
Well, it's not exactly that it's not about those things, but the interactions between those two things are a means to an end. And when the whole sort of factory idea got started in the 1970s, the focus that they had at the 1972 conference on program test methods, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Bill Hetzel, I believe he was the program chair of that, but in any case, he wrote the book that essentially was the proceedings rendered into book form. You don't see that stuff. You don't see the human value stuff. Instead, there's a big focus on provable correctness and process and sort of and method.
Yeah.
But without the on techne, without the focus on what we want to accomplish, right? What we're trying to do for people, and when we're trying to do stuff, we're always trying to do it for somebody. In the same way, I mean, for years I've been noticing this, that in test case documentation, test case kind of stuff, what you see is a set of steps to follow and a set of results to observe. But what you rarely see in this is the motivation for it, right? Why would this be important to somebody? Why would anybody care about this? And I argue fairly strenuously that if you understand the motivation, then the procedures take care of themselves a lot more than if you follow the procedures and the motivation sort of reveals itself unto you. I don't buy that. I think that it's really important for us to engage with our work and with the human processes that motivate it.
Yeah. So like the example you used, that people don't want to use a drill, they just want a hole. So
yes.
If we would put the trigger of the drill on top of the drill, yes, you would be able to drill a hole, but it'd be really hard for them to use the drill.
Well, more to the point, they don't even want a hole.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
They want something that the hole affords them, right? Something that the hole will let them do. But that's a nice shorthand way of saying it, that people don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. Yeah.
That's brilliant, yeah. Fantastic. But yeah, that's good. It's slowly just kind of, and getting that conversation into the dev teams that I work with is kind of like, remember, it's about the people. There are people using our website at the end of this. So what you're really? It's like, so when you say, it's like, I'm noticing that I can't get onto the website. Oh really? Hang on, let me just check the web server. Well, the web server's running. It's like, and I can't get onto the web. Just because your web server's running doesn't mean the customer can do what he wants to do. It's a fun conversation to have.
People are funny that way.
Yeah.
I'm also, you're speaking of the tacit and explicit knowledge talk that I did at Let's Test, but I also did a talk on problems. Not a talk as so much as a workshop, and we got people to sort of sit down and bat about what constitutes a problem.
Of course, yeah.
And a lot of the time they would say, well, what is a problem? Well, something in the requirements document is not met. Well, that's true, I guess. But what a problem amounts to is a conflict or a mismatch between what's there and what's desired. And there's no formula for desire. There's no function that you can add to your code that intrinsically satisfies desire. You've got to look at the product in those kinds of human terms and realize that it's there to perform or produce something that is desirable to some person.
Yes. Yeah. Again, the social relationship aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good. And so was that a good tutorial? Did you get good feedback in it? Was people responsive?
I was really impressed, although, at Let's Test, it's important to learn to get over this. I was impressed at the energy that people threw into this, at the effort they put into thinking about this and working it through and talking about it with other people. Again, a social activity, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They treated the sort of little exercises or assignments or points of departure that I offered as things to be worked out in a way that you just don't that often see. Now, there's a chicken and egg thing there too, which is that although Let's Test has a certain kind of constituency, that there are certain kinds of people who select themselves and draw themselves in that direction. Other conferences could have that stuff, and they don't. Other conferences are much more rooted, it seems to me, in a mode of presentation or delivery, wherein somebody shows up, stands in front of a room, and that's how you know they're the smart one, because they're the one standing at the front of the room.
Yeah.
And therefore, nobody else in the room could possibly be as smart as the person who's standing in front of the room. And then the idea is everybody stays quiet for some period of time, typically 40, 45 minutes, an hour, something like that. And then some magic happens and somebody's learned something. Well, I'm guilty of that myself. I've done presentations like that, and I did it for years. And the thing that I'm trying to get out of it, I want to, and I'm like a whiskey priest. I have a really hard time doing this. Is to get out of the way and watch in wonder at what people are able to produce when you give them a problem to solve and let them get at it, and stay out of their way. Far more than what I brought into the room on my own. And I think far more than what they brought into the room on their own, too.
Yeah. Because no one person is bigger than the group they're in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's really remarkable. And Let's Test affords that really well.
Yeah, I think Johanna touched on that, didn't she? She always tries to hire people who are brighter than her or cleverer than her, because someone who's cleverer than you in some aspect.
Hiring people who are more clever than I am is usually not that much of a problem for me. I love being in a room where there are people much smarter than I am. And I mean, it's the same way when I go play music. I play Irish traditional music for fun. And my contention is that everybody who's around the circle should be a better player than I am if I'm really going to enjoy myself.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't want to be in the middle of the pack there. I want to be with people who are way better than I am, and that's actually, I'm lucky because that's what happens for me here in Toronto at the session I go to. It's just some really, really great players, and I learn much more rapidly in that kind of environment, put under a little pressure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Same with badminton. I used to play against a guy who was like 6'5", and he used to beat me every week in, week out, back. And I was like, "Why do you play? Surely you're not getting any." He goes, "Well, it's not me that's winning; it's you that's losing, because like silly shots are won." I was still giving him a run for his money, but just at the crunch time, I'd lose. So, but yeah, you learn with people who are better than you, definitely.
Yeah. So I've spent my whole life seeking mentors, and I encourage people to do this. You can do it too. There's no, there's no magic to it. When you express to somebody who's really good at what they do a sincere interest in what they do, the vast majority of them will, in my experience, be tremendously generous. Because they got into whatever it is they're into because of their love of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they tend to love talking about it, and they tend to love talking about themselves. People do, people like talking about themselves, I think, most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when they are sharing with somebody the sort of object and purpose of their day, well, that's cloud nine for them. As I say, in most cases, not absolutely everybody's like that. And some experts are introverted or shy or what have you. But in my experience, I've gone so far. I've got so much value out of being brave and asking somebody if they would be good enough to share what they know with me. And if you do that sort of politely and forthrightly and wholeheartedly, they will almost always respond in kind.
Yeah.
And so, I try to pay that forward as well when people get in touch with me. I do my best to help them out. And that's how we progress by sharing our passion for stuff.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah, it's like the likes of James, yourself, and Anne Marie with your online Skype coaching. I know I've taken advantage of that from James and Anne Marie. Very helpful.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is when somebody asks me for help, when there's when I do a coaching session like that, I learn a ton as I'm going through that session, and that's of great value to me. I need to sharpen my expression of ideas and things like that. That's really important for my work. And so being able to do that or having to do that in a coaching session is of great value to me.
Yeah. We have the concept in the National Health Service of see one, do one, teach one. So you see someone do it, you do it yourself, and then you try and teach it to someone else, and that reinforces the fact that you're having to convey what you're doing to someone else. Really reinforces what you're saying and how you go about your task.
Yeah, even more so when you do it a lot. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fantastic.
When you're teaching people a lot, I mean.
Yeah.
It is a way, and back to Harry again, but it's a way of immersing yourself in that culture in a way that is different from the way that most people think about it. But by doing coaching online, I'm immersing myself in a culture of testing in ways that are quite different from the usual ones, and there's a big plus to that. It alters your perception of the domain. I think it's great.
Yeah, you could definitely being on the receiving end when you're working with a transcript rather than talking through a problem. You're typing through a problem. It's a whole different way of thinking of things, isn't it? It's just, and you're like, oh yeah. As you write it, and you can see yourself writing. You're going, don't write that, especially not in front of James. Oh, it's out there. Oh well. Because I remember the first time I just asked him a question, and he came back to me while I was on the iPad. And into a bit of a full-blown coaching session. I'm there with the software keyboard, like, oh crikey, I can't keep up. Oh, just to add the complication. It's all good. Right, so I want to move on to EuroSTAR, if we may, and program chair for EuroSTAR. So how's it going?
Well, I would like to believe that the hard work is done until the actual conference. Now, I'm probably not right about that. I'll discover that. But the greatest effort certainly so far, seems to have been in between the end of the call for papers and the announcement of the selection of the program.
I can imagine.
Because we did have all these submissions, there's 420 or so of them, and everybody on the program committee read all the submissions. That's a lot of work. We thought about all the sessions. That's even more work. And we had to prioritize them and balance them, and we had to choose a lot of the time between worthy contenders for a slot or a position. And so that was effortful. It was hard work. I created my own luck. I was extraordinarily lucky in the group of people who were on the program committee. But I chose them for good reasons. And my experience is that my choices were, for once, absolutely correct. It was just a great group of people to work with in every dimension, and so that part of it was really terrific, really wonderful. Things have slowed down quite a bit since then. I still have to produce a monthly blog post for the EuroSTAR people,
yeah.
And since my my muse has been somewhat absent over the last year or two, I haven't been writing to the degree that I was writing in 2006 through 2009 or so. I'm just in a bit of a, not exactly a drought, but a kind of stuck in writing. So the exercise of having to go through that deadline has been worthwhile. That's been a good thing.
Good.
But I'm excited about the program. I see we've got a reach into the history of EuroSTAR, the sort of traditions of it, and we've got people on the leading edge. I think we've got a good focus on the social aspects of things. We've got some people who are going to be delivering solid presentations, I think, and tutorials on automation and technical issues, and we also have the social stuff covered pretty well too. We emphasized in our selection process people who are providing experience reports. We de-emphasized people who were touting a particular tool or technique outside of the experience report. So that was handy. I think a good approach to dealing with this stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited by it. Also Gothenburg is a really cool town. I was just there for the first time in May, and it's terrific. There's lots of neat stuff in there, and it's a very walkable city and everything like that. So looking forward to it.
Good. And have you, on your video, you ask to people to provide punctuation to the statement questioning testing. Have you had any feedback? I've had a go myself, but I want to hear if you got any first before I...
Oh, of course, I had my own stuff in my house. No, I didn't have a whole lot of people explicitly coming to me and talking about that. What do you got for me there?
So I think the most obscure one I've got is questioning, semicolon, testing, comma, ... Because I was expecting stuff. But yeah, I cheated a bit as well. I also had questioning equals testing, question mark.
Very good.
I've used an operator instead of punctuation, so slightly cheated. But yeah.
The judges will accept that.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, that's all I've got. Unless there's anything you want to talk about before we sign off?
Nothing in particular. I'm just excited about sort of continuing awareness, a growing awareness, and a continuing growth in our awareness of these parts of the world that have remained invisible to us for a lot of the time. At least invisible as long as we weren't paying attention to Jerry Weinberg and M. Kainer and people like that. But also the ideas of Nassim Taleb.
Yes,
and in his book Antifragile, here's the thing that I take from that book more than anything else. There's lots of great stuff in it, but the idea of a -1 to 1 scale instead of a 0 to 1 scale, to me, is very interesting. And I'm very chuffed by the fact that at one point I dropped Nassim Taleb a tweet in which I said, the opposite of the opposite of reject is not accept. The opposite of reject is promote. And I was really chuffed because he wrote back, brilliant, great insight. Well, thank you very much. That's very nice. But what was interesting about that to me is the fact that our scales, I think, are far too often a 0 to 1 based, as opposed to -1 to +1. That there are things that are the opposite. The example he uses in Antifragile, of course, is, well, there's fragile, and then there's robust. But he points out that there are things in the world that are not merely robust to shock or to being poked or being shaken. There are things that actually benefit from that. And if we look at the things that benefit from being shaken, what we see is that they're anti-fragilizing, right? That they stop. They're not merely robust. They actually gain from being shaken up. And then it occurred to me, of course, that testing, shaking stuff up, is an anti-fragilizing element of software development.
Of course, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So now I'm on a whole tear trying to look for stuff that follows that pattern, right? So, for example, the opposite of literacy, would be illiteracy, non-literate.
Yeah.
But actually, I think there's a kind of anti-literacy thing where we actively reject the written word in exchange for other modes of communication or other modes of looking at how we relate to one another. So, I mean, think of in terms of what people are trying to do with visualizations, and you could argue that that's a form of literacy, a different form of literacy, but it's a form of literacy that tries to get us away from the phonetic alphabet, from the linearity of an alphabet, and tries to get us to see things in different kinds of systems. I'm excited by that. I'm not very good at it, but I'm fascinated by it. So maybe that's where we're going. A search for things that are not within our current realm of knowledge. And of course, what goes with that naturally is look at all this stuff in testing, that all the things that are not explicit, and not only all the things that are not merely not written down, which is the form of tacit knowledge that Harry Collins refers to as relational tacit knowledge, stuff that hasn't been written down yet, even though we could write it down. We could express it. Think of all the stuff that is inexpressible, that is the opposite of explicit knowledge, not just the absence of it, but the opposite of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fruitful area for us to start investigating. The irony being, of course, that how do you take something that can't be explicit and make it explicit?
Yeah. Which is,
we could observe it.
yeah. See examples of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wicked. Well,
but I guess the other part of it is so that Taleb points out that something is antifragile only to a point, right? Just because something, like, think about the human body is his favorite example. It benefits from a modest amount of stress. Well, obviously, if you stress it too much, you kill it.
yeah.
But in the same way, there are certain things that are tacit that we could examine or express in various different kinds of ways. They're not completely impenetrably tacit, but by thinking about them at all, by considering that they might exist, then maybe we can get some traction on them and understand and appreciate them for what they are.
Yeah, fantastic. You've just given me a whole lot of food for thought there, Michael, as usual. My reading list, that's a good thing. My reading list is just quadrupled, which is good. I'll put links to those references as well on the video, which will be handy for other people looking for them.
All right.
Which will be good. So I'm going to sign off now, Michael, unless you have anything else.
No, thank you very much for calling up. Pleasure chatting.
Oh, as always, and the pleasure is all mine, honestly.
Oh, no, it's mine too. You got to share. Can't have it all for yourself.
Thank you, Michael, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
All right, take care. Thank you, Duncan.
Cheers, Michael. Bye-bye.
All the best.